I'm the syndicate manager at Thomas Miller Hellas. Thomas Miller are the managers of the UK P&I and the UK Defence Clubs. What I've done for you this evening is just collected 10 of our recent loss prevention bulletins. There's no particular theme. I'm going to jump about a bit, hence UK P&I Club miscellany. First of all, something that will make you scream. The Australian policymakers have an extremely low tolerance of oil pollution. That's reflected in the Protection of the Sea, Prevention of Pollution from Ships Act, 1983. Sections 9 and 10 of the Act provide for strict liability and maximum fines of 3.4 million Australian dollars for an individual and 17 million Australian dollars for a corporation. Section 26 gives AMSA, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, the power to detain a ship. Section 27 gives AMSA the right to demand security for their claim, or for the possible fine. I recently became aware of a case. It is alleged that there was some oil or oily substance on the deck, and that this was washed overboard while the ship was being washed down. The crew deny it. AMSA have not actually brought any evidence to show that it happened, but they detained the ship and they requested security for the maximum amount, $20.4 million. They said that they had no discretion. They had to request the maximum amount. And the advice from Australian lawyers at the moment is, until there's a change in the legislation, or until there is judicial review, then that is likely to remain the situation. Customs fines. Not everybody's favourite. The lady at the front there is clearly tooled up with something on her mind. They're only doing their job, but in some countries we're finding that they're overzealous or pedantic, particularly when it comes to the declarations of ship stores or bunkers. Ukraine comes to mind, some of the West African countries come to mind. We had a case last year in Argentina, in San Nicolas. The master was declaring the bunkers on board. As he might do, he used the previous form as guidance as to how to fill in the one for this visit. Unfortunately, when the paperwork was submitted, the old form went in with the new one. The customs added both bunker declarations together. Clearly, the ship had nowhere near the bunkers on board that were declared. We had to give security for $580,000 to get the ship away. Your crews, your master and chief engineer need to be very vigilant and even avoiding administrative or clerical errors when they're submitting these declarations. There's 2 concentrated inspection campaigns underway at the moment. You may well be aware they started on the 1st of September. They're going to run for 3 months. The Caribbean MOU, focusing on compliance with MARPOL Annex 1, Regulation 14. This is dealing with the operability of oil filtering equipment and sludge handling. The Paris and Tokyo combined MOUs, we're talking about 45 states here, and I've seen indications that there might be as many as 10,000 inspections. They're looking at compliance with SOLAS Chapter 2. They're focusing on safety, the working order and maintenance of the propulsion machinery, auxiliary machinery, and alarm systems. They're paying special attention to the familiarity of the crew with the safety and emergency procedures. As usual, if deficiencies are found or inadequacies, then they'll either be recorded, or if they're more serious, then there'll be a detention until they're rectified. Loading grain through cement holes in Vancouver, in Canada. In fact, we've not issued a bulletin on this. This was an inquiry that came in 2 or 3 months ago. What we're seeing here is some shippers of grain in Vancouver asking ships to load the grain through the cement holes during periods of rain. There's commercial pressure because the shippers say that if you're not prepared to do it, we'll find another ship that's waiting that is, and she'll come in ahead of you. I haven't seen one yet myself, but there may be charter party clauses that actually require owners to do this around at the moment. So again, something to watch out for. The member concerned here was a little concerned about it, and we were as well, so we referred it to the local correspondent. We also took some advice from a consultant. Few things to think about then. Clearly, if you are going to do this, you can only do it during the beginning and the middle phases of loading. Because of the grain regulations, the hatches are going to need to be open when you're topping off so that they're full, or if it's a slack hold, it needs to be trimmed level. We're not so far aware of any incidents of water ingress. The ship's lines are going to need to be kept tight and be monitored. Clearly, if you've got a pipe going through the hatch cover, then there shouldn't be any movement. To avoid static build-up, then the pipe should be non-conductive, and the area around the cement hold should be insulated, as we can see there. Concern about dust levels inside the hold, but in fact we're told that they've got monitors that are able to monitor the dust levels to ensure that they're within safe working parameters. My own point on this was it's a bill of lading type angle. The master in the bill of lading will be signing for the apparent order and condition of the cargo, but for much of the loading, unlike usually when his hatches are open, he won't be able to see it. He won't be able to see that apparent order and condition. When the cargo's loaded, if these feeder holes haven't been used before, or they haven't been used for some considerable time, perhaps infrequently, then you're probably going to have to renew the gaskets. And finally, on this point anyway, we believe that tests have been carried out by the authorities in Canada, and it is suggested that it's safe to load in this fashion. No fines for no switching the fuel over from heavy fuel oil to low sulfur in California. We're still seeing ships fined. Few examples: a car carrier, 17 visits to California without switching over, fined nearly $300,000. A bulk carrier in August 2012 visited LA without switching over, fine of $53,000. Bulk carrier earlier this year visited Stockton and Long Beach, fine of $87,750. Your chief engineer needs to remember to switch over. He needs to document it before going into regulated Californian waters. Now down to South America and Brazil. Visas for crew members. The point here is that ships trading Brazilian cargoes between Brazilian ports, then all the crew must have something called a temporary V consular visa. There is a 30-day grace period So if you get the business over with within 30 days, you're okay. If you don't, then the likelihood is that the ship will be fined. And we had a case last year of a ship that was fined $23,000. The other worrying element, not in that case but we've heard in others, is that the crew may need to be repatriated fairly promptly. We're talking about 72 hours. So again, something to watch out for. This is crab shell meal. It's not shipped very often, I guess, but we see it shipped in containers from time to time. This was a shipment from Halifax to Japan. The ship arrived on the voyage in Oakland, and smoke was seen coming from the container. The container was put ashore, was opened up, the fire was put out. We had somebody have a look at it. It was determined that it was caused by spontaneous combustion. The container had actually been stowed on deck and in direct sunlight, and the ambient temperature was around 90 Fahrenheit. In fact, crab shell meal is not classed as a dangerous cargo. But certainly at the moment, in the absence of those regulations, then we're recommending that crab shell meal is handled, stowed and shipped with the same precautions as fish meal. The UN number for fish meal is 2216. This is Genoa. Some of you may recognize the terminal in the mid-ground there. It's the VTE terminal there. We've been advised by our correspondent in Genoa very recently that ships visiting the terminal will be inspected. Particularly their oil pollution type documents will be inspected, the IOPP certificate, the air pollution prevention certificate, oil record book, bunker receipts, the last 3, main engine running hours. They're also carrying out sulfur content tests there as well, and ships will be fined if they're above the permissible levels. I actually did a little bit of research last week. I had a look to see what fines the UK club had in Europe for not having low sulfur fuel on board. And in fact, I was only able to come across one case for this policy year. But again, it was Italy, it was Taranto. In that case, there was a fine of 30,000 euros, but I understand the maximum can be 150,000 euros. Electronic bills of lading. There's not really a safety angle here at the moment, but I thought that I would mention it because we have been getting a lot of inquiries on electronic bills of lading and the P&I cover position. Certainly on the dry side, we're seeing Cargill and Bunge pushing the use of electronic bills at the moment. Typical P&I liabilities are covered to the extent that they would have been covered if a paper bill of lading had been used. So if it's a regular cargo claim, loss, shortage or damage, you're going to be covered. To the extent that the claim arose because an electronic bill of lading was used, then cover is discretionary unless the system that is being used has been approved by the international group. And at the moment, we've just got 2 systems that have been approved. One is called Bolero, the other is ESS. All exceptions and exclusions under the P&I rules continue to apply. The other point to note is that owners may expose themselves to risks which are not of a P&I nature. What we've been seeing, I guess, over the last few months is the development of some charter party clauses whereby owners try and pass these liabilities or additional liabilities onto the charterer in return for actually using one of the e-bill systems. Finally, an old favourite, Asian gypsy moths. The Asian gypsy moth populations in Far Eastern Russia, North and South Korea, Japan, northern China have been high again this year. We're seeing ships arriving in the US and Canada with the egg masses on board. If they're found, then the ship will be instructed to move offshore for further cleaning and further inspection. In order to avoid delay, you've got to have the AGM certificate from the relevant body in the port of departure. You've got to depart from that port as soon as possible after the certificate has been issued. You've got to conduct self-checking en route and document it, and then the agents at the port of arrival have got to be informed before arrival. The other thing that's hot off the press on Asian gypsy moths is that with effect from the 12th of January next year, Chile is going to have very similar requirements to Canada and the United States. That then is all from me. It's just I've given you a bit of a flavour of things to watch out for. I hope you found them useful. Thank you.